Hello everyone. I was having some technical issues today with using Blackboard Connect during our Class Connect session, so I wanted to go ahead and record it in this. I am, however, restricted to a time limit by using this program, so I wanted to get through the information just a little bit. That way you have at least some exposure to this poetry, since I know sometimes poems can be tricky for people. Okay, so if you were not in today's session, that was the kind of background story. If you were in today's session, thanks for sticking around well, I tried to figure it out, but I just didn't want to waste any more of your time. Okay, so here is some information about William Blake poetry that you need to know. So we did get through the warm-up in class. Some very good examples were shared for these sentences and how they include imagery, or sentences to include imagery. Today we're going to read two William Blake poems, analyze structure and language, and analyze how imagery and allusion shape theme. A few things to know: he was born in London, England. He was a writer and an artist. He was best known for his poetry collections, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. We'll read one poem from each collection. He was a radical thinker in his politics. He believed the monarchy and church were tyrants. The Bible had a huge influence on William Blake, as revealed in his poetry, so even though he was against the church, he was by no means against religion and the Bible, or God. Okay? He wrote a lot of poetry about God and faith and how people treat each other. These are very important things in his life. His lack of trust in the church had nothing to do with his relationship with God. He just felt like the church got in the way of his relationship with God, and he was not okay with that. So some reminders: rhyme, allusion, imagery, stanza, and theme. Make sure you watch last Wednesday's session where we went over these elements in depth. Sensory details, figurative language, such as metaphor, simile, personification, and alliteration. Okay, let me go back. Here are some definitions for this figurative language for you. If you don't remember what these 4 or 5 elements meant for the first bullet, make sure you watch last Wednesday's session where we go over those in depth. But these are things we'll be looking for in today's poems. They will also be things that will come up in today's questions. So now we have the first poem, On Another's Sorrow. This is from his Songs of Innocence collection by William Blake. Can I see another's woe and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear and not feel my sorrow's share? Can a father see his child, weep, nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear an infant groan and infant fear? No, no, never can it be, never, never can it be. And can he who smiles on all hear the wren with sorrows small, hear the small bird's grief and care, hear the woes that infants bear, and not sit beside the nest, pouring pity in their breast, and not sit the cradle near, weeping tear on infant's tear, and not sit both night and day, wiping all our tears away? Oh no, never can it be, never, never can it be. He doth give his joy to all, he becomes an infant small, he becomes a man of woe, he doth feel the sorrow too. Think not thou canst sigh a sigh, and thy Maker is not by. Think not thou canst weep a tear, and thy Maker is not near. Oh, he gives to us his joy, that our grief he may destroy. Till our grief is fled and gone, he doth sit by us and moan. Okay, so you can see the tone shift a little bit in this poem. In these first 2 columns here, things seem a little bit more dire, things seem a little bit more tragic. And then this third column here helps us to really understand where we can go if we're feeling this sorrow, how we can still feel confident even if we're feeling this sorrow. And you can probably assume from some of the background information we gave about Blake who he turns to in his own time of sorrow, so that way we can turn to this person too, and he turns to God. We can see from the capitalization of he in this stanza right here. And so all of these things that other people may not be able to give comfort toward these other people feeling these sorrows or feeling this grief or sitting and crying, we can always turn back to God to help our sorrows be healed. Okay, so what do we think the tone is of On Another's Sorrow? If we look at peaceful, it may end peacefully, but that's not the main tone he's going for. Fanciful, it's not very fancy. his poetry, he would much rather tell things like they are rather than making them any kind of fanciful. And definitely not cruelty, okay? He does not speak of things that are cruel. So we're looking more at a sad tone, okay? Because the majority of it is focusing on people's sorrow, what people do with their sorrow, what they wish they could do with their sorrow, and giving them some solutions of things of people or of a person in particular that they can turn to when they are feeling that sorrow. So the majority of the tone of the poem is sad. The answer is B. Read the passage. What poetic devices does Blake use in the third stanza? Select all the answers that are correct. Can a mother sit and hear an infant groan in infant fear? No, no, never can it be, never can it be. So we already see A, repetition, with these last two lines. We see rhyme with hear, fear, be, be. We don't see an allusion. Nothing is being alluded to that people in society should already know and understand. And then we have alliteration. Alliteration, which is the repetition of the first letter of a word within a sentence, and we do have it here. No, no, never, never, never. Okay, so we have all but C. All but C are correct. Blake often uses imagery to evoke a particular feeling or reaction. Read the stanza. Can a mother sit and hear an infant groan in infant fear? No, no, never can it be, never, never can it be. So we were going to highlight or underline the imagery Blake uses in these lines. We have things like groan and hear and fear to help us picture what's going on in this stanza. So how does it affect the reader? An infant crying is definitely something you'll probably hear in the background in your mind. I know a lot of people like to turn and look when they hear a kid crying, or especially when they can tell when it's an infant crying. There's a very, very different sound coming from an infant when they cry as opposed to a toddler or a child or a person. Maybe just a little bit more sympathy for an infant. How does this connect to the mood or tone of the poem? If he's trying to get a person or a reader to understand where they should turn in their times of sorrow, they are going to different relationships. So a relationship between a mother and an infant, and how sometimes the mother feels like she can never do enough to comfort the infant if they're crying. Sometimes they just feel like nothing is ever going to stop them from crying. So giving a great example of who that mother can turn to help ease their children's sorrow. Okay, helping the mood and the tone, helping to maintain that sad tone, but also keep a hopeful mood in the poem, because even though they have this sadness, they do have something that they can turn to bring them back their hope. Okay, and then just to identify the theme of this poem, I'm just going to move a little bit along because I'm running out of time. He then says that God responds to human sorrow in the same way. So just what we've been talking about. Okay, so what lines in the poem show that God will be there to comfort your sorrow? So God being comfort to you, especially during times of sorrow, would be the theme of this poem. And then we have our second poem, The Human Abstract, also by William Blake. But where the prior poem was from Songs of Innocence, this is from Songs of Experience. Okay, so maybe taking on a little bit different tone from the previous poem. Pity we would be no more if we did not make somebody poor, and mercy no more could be if we were all happy as we. And mutual fear brings peace till the selfish loves increase. Then cruelty knits a snare and spreads his baits with care. He sits down with holy fears and waters the ground with tears. Then humility takes its root underneath his foot. Soon spreads the dismal shade of mystery over his head, and the caterpillar and fly feed on the mystery. And it bears the fruit of deceit, ruddy and sweet to eat, and the raven his nest has made in its thicket's shade. The gods of the earth and sea sought through nature to find this tree, but their search was all in vain. There grows one in the human brain. Okay, so the human abstract, looking at humans kind of from afar, seeing how complicated they are. So according to human abstract, what brings peace? So we know that, let's see, and mutual fear brings peace. So we have B, mutual fear. So both parties, both people, kind of having a fear, or even we can look at it as respect. Not just fear, but respect for each other. those two equal things bring peace. If one person is more fearful of the other, or if one person has more or less respect for the other, that's going to bring a little bit of contention, kind of the opposite of peace. What would be if we were all happy? What would be no more if we were all happy? The answer to that was mercy. If we were all happy, we would have nothing to forgive the other one for. In this poem, Blake describes a tree of mystery, which interferes with man's relationship with God. In particular, Blake notes, "And the raven his nest has made in its thickest shade." Ravens often represent death. Okay, what kind of raven do you think Blake is representing with this raven? Okay, so we have a tree of mystery. If a raven has made its nest in a tree of mystery, which interferes with man's relationship with God, what kind of death do you think has happened? Especially considering what is most important to Blake. Okay, a man's relationship with God, or a person's relationship with God, is very, very important to Blake. So if a tree of mystery is getting in the way of that relationship, and a bird that represents death is within that tree, we're probably talking about the kind of death that happens spiritually, not physically. So maybe losing faith in God, maybe something like that, which is the kind of death he's talking about. Blake believed church created an unnecessary mystery around God and prayer. How does Blake represent that idea with this illusion? So again, coming back to that spiritual death, or that loss of connection between God and prayer, which he felt like church gave. Church gave that death. Church brought on that interference. Okay, so that's what he's trying to represent with that illusion. And what mood does this illusion create? So saying that the church is bringing a death to a spiritual relationship, that brings on kind of a, what kind of mood can we say for that? Kind of like a spiteful mood, or a betrayed mood, okay? So Blake is using vivid imagery in this poem. Hopefully you can look at each of these stanzas and identify on your own where that imagery is, where that figurative language or sensory details lie within these two poems, within these two stanzas. In the first two stanzas, Blake represents the theme of his poem. What do you think his theme is? So these are the first two stanzas. Pity would be no more if we did not make somebody poor, and mercy no more could be if we were all happy as we. And mutual fear brings peace till the selfish love increase. Then cruelty knits a snare and spreads his baits with care. So if we're looking at just those first two stanzas, think about what you think his main idea of this poem is, especially considering that end stanza we were talking about with that spiritual death brought to your relationship with God by the church. Okay, Blake argues that some virtues, such as pity and mercy, do more harm than good. Blake believes that if people treated each other with genuine love, there would be no need for these false virtues. Virtues such as pity and mercy. So people feeling sorry for others, or people taking mercy on others. There'd be no need for those two things if we were all just genuinely nice to each other, if we were all just genuinely respected each other. Okay? And he may feel like the church sometimes creates these virtues, or makes people feel these virtues in their lives, and which he thinks is a very, very bad thing for the church to be doing. Okay, so tomorrow we will look at 2 more quizzes, and then there will be a quiz due on this material. During tomorrow's 1 o'clock session, I will definitely review anything about these poems that you want to go over, since we weren't able to meet together to actually go over them. Don't forget to take the interim checkpoint 1 assessment. If it is completed by the end of today, you will earn extra credit. There should be a reminder when you log into the class home page if you have not yet taken that assessment. Remember, there's 2 parts. I'm not going to provide you with an exit ticket survey today since we weren't able to meet live, but I will see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Tuesday's 1 o'clock session is by no means canceled. If the PowerPoint is not working again, we will just figure something out. Okay, thanks for watching.